At the Gui residence, there was a unique pavilion known as Gui Angia. An old man looking tired and worn out sat with his longtime friend, feeling let down. After all the years of waiting, he had only been offered a single cup of drink to share. Across from him sat a man in a sea blue robe who seemed distant and detached, his skin marked with scars from past battles. As Angia poured the drink, the old man reminisced about their first meeting when they were both young. Angia observed his friend, noting that despite his serious and aloof demeanor, there was a fire in his eyes that had never faded. It had been 40 years since they first crossed paths. When the man in the blue robe entered the house, he quickly made a shocking request that left Angia speechless. He wanted to learn the Great Regression Technique, a way to go back in time. Angia was taken aback, struggling to grasp the weight of such a demand. This technique was a treasured legacy of the Gui family, carefully studied and passed down through generations. Although it was theoretically possible, actually performing it had always seemed out of reach. As Angia regained his composure, a smile crept onto his face. He made a promise. If the man could gather the 5 rare materials needed for the technique, he would help him. These items were no ordinary relics. They included the Thunder Bell, a sacred artifact from the Heavenly Wind cult, the Divine Incense Brazier from the Divine Dragon family, the core essence of a 10,000-year-old carp, and the secret demonic soul from a long-gone demonic cult. To everyone's surprise, the man had managed to collect all the sacred materials after disappearing for a long time to find the secret demonic soul. Angia had thought he was lost forever in some unknown valley. Finally, the man took a sip from his drink and expressed his frustration with the so-called Great Technique, cursing its ridiculous requirements. He even toyed with the idea of killing Angia, but something had changed in him over the years. The man who once brimmed with youth and energy now carried the heavy burden of time and struggle. This transformation was a result of his relentless quest for the materials. Angia couldn't help but wonder what drove this desperate need to return to the past. Suddenly, the cup slammed down on the table and a chilling aura of bloodlust filled the air. The man's intent to kill was unmistakable. He claimed his reason for wanting to go back was revenge. Angia, curious, asked who the target of such hatred was. A wave of dread washed over him when he heard the name Wahamogi. This was a name that struck fear in the hearts of many, the strongest figure in history who had taken down the 3 pillars of the Miram world, the leader of the Miram Alliance, and even the Heavenly Demon himself. Challenging Wamogi was a daunting task, yet the man remained steadfast in his desire for vengeance. He then revealed a shocking truth. The Heavenly Demon that Wamogi had killed was his father. Angia was taken aback, realizing that this man was the heir of the Heavenly Demon. However, the man clarified that his quest for revenge wasn't just about his father's death or the loss of his so-called brother. The deaths of those who had aligned with demons didn't bother him much. He hesitated for a moment, then continued to explain his true motivation. Wamogi hadn't just killed warriors, he had slaughtered the innocent, including servants, children, and even pets. Angia struggled to believe that Wamogi could commit such heinous acts, yet the man showed no interest in persuading him otherwise. At his current age, killing Wamogi seemed impossible. The only way to alter fate, he believed, was to go back to the past. Angia felt hopeless, realizing he couldn't change his fate. He made a bold request. He wanted the man to stop his own marriage. The room fell silent, as if time had paused. The man, expecting something serious, was taken aback when he burst into laughter. Angia, however, was dead serious. He pleaded, asking to be convinced to live a life of solitude. The man, sensing Angia's sincerity, agreed to help him. As Angia struggled to get up, he urged the man to start the process. Ray, worried about the man's condition, tried to brush off his concerns. The man, despite having lost an arm and an eye, felt it was a small price to pay for the secret he had obtained. Finally, Angia gathered the sacred relics. When he opened the box containing the soul, he raised his hands in a prayer-like gesture and began the incantation. The relics glowed with power as he spoke the words. With the final verse, a brilliant light filled the room, and a wormhole opened, releasing a powerful surge of energy. Angia, after dedicating his life to this moment, stood in awe. He turned to share his excitement with his old friend, but his heart sank. The old man was slumped against a pillar, clearly exhausted and asleep. Though weary, he looked strangely peaceful. Ray's gaze shifted to the portal, and he felt the pull of temptation. He whispered an apology for what he was about to do, vowing to warn his friend in the past about the disaster to come. He stepped toward the wormhole, his heart racing with the desire to change everything. But then he froze, realizing he was trapped. The old man appeared behind him, furious, demanding to know how Angia could even think of betraying him. The question echoed, filled with anger. Ray fell to the ground, panic taking over. He begged for forgiveness, feeling the weight of his mistake. Tears filled his eyes as he prayed for mercy. The old man, admitting his own selfishness, revealed that he had only cared for himself to gather the materials needed for this moment. He acknowledged that if Angia had been anyone else, he would have faced immediate death. For the first time in years, a rare smile appeared on the old man's face as he thanked Angia for waiting so long. Tears welled up in Ray's eyes, knowing their time together was ending. Suddenly, the colors around the old man began to fade, and time itself seemed to freeze. Confused, he tried to grasp what was happening. An ancient being emerged from the void, radiating an incredible presence. The old man demanded to know who it was. The being introduced itself as the one who would send him back in time, explaining that the logic of the universe was beyond human understanding. It wasn't just the relics that made time travel possible, it was the effort and sacrifices made to obtain them. The old man had passed the test, his life defined by the goal of collecting those items. Forgiving Angia had been the hardest challenge, but he had done it without hesitation. The being then asked what he planned to do once he returned to the past. Without a moment's thought, the old man declared he wanted to eliminate those who deserved it and save the innocent. He sought to erase a life filled with regret, feeling that every action had been controlled by outside forces. As the ancient being listened, a smile appeared on its face, intrigued by the life that awaited the old man. It looked forward to witnessing his new journey. With those final words, the being vanished and time resumed. Kengo wasted no time swinging his sword, demanding ManhwaCapped to draw his own weapon. But ManhwaCapped just stood there, unfazed. He thought there was no need for a sword against someone like Kengo. Annoyed by the lack of response, Kengo charged, aiming to slice off an arm. ManhwaCapped dodged effortlessly, feeling a rush of satisfaction at how quick and agile his younger body was. Kengo was faster than he expected. Another strike came, but ManhwaCapped simply jumped out of the way. Excitement bubbled up inside him. His heart raced with the thrill of youth and endless potential. He was lost in his own thoughts while Kengo kept attacking, frustration growing as ManhwaCapped's calm smile never wavered. Instead of dodging again, ManhwaCapped decided to meet Kengo head-on. Kengo swung again, but ManhwaCapped elbowed him hard in the stomach. Before Kengo could react, ManhwaCapped landed a sharp jab that broke his nose. Blow after blow followed, not giving Kengo a chance to fight back. Kengo was in trouble, blood spilling from his mouth as he struggled to understand what was happening. Just as he was about to collapse, ManhwaCapped grabbed his hand, questioning if it was the same hand that had used poison. Without waiting for an answer, he crushed it, causing Kengo to scream in pain. The crowd watched in stunned silence as ManhwaCapped displayed ruthless skill. He showed no hesitation in causing harm, a true disciple of the Blood Heaven Sword Demon. In that moment, the determination in ManhwaCapped's eyes was clear. Having returned to the past, he was resolved to live life on his own terms. A single raised hand from the heavenly demon silenced the arena instantly. His gaze fell on his son, instructing him to declare his wish for winning the duel. Traditionally, victors asked for fancy weapons or secret martial arts manuals, and the air was thick with expectation. But ManhwaCapped chose to follow his gut. He simply wanted to go hunting with his father. To make sure everyone understood, he clarified that he had heard stories of his father's love for hunting in his youth and wanted to learn from him directly. He stood up, ready to make his request known. Choa agreed, announcing their departure at dawn without further discussion. He turned and walked away, signaling the end of the fight. Meanwhile, Kango, helped to his feet, scoffed at Mayuguk's choice, calling him a fool for wasting such an opportunity on a hunting trip instead of asking for something valuable. In response, Mayuguk asked for Kango's name, his tone dripping with disdain, making it clear that he considered Kango beneath him. Now that he had returned, the reckless life that once defined those around him held no appeal. Later, as the sun set in brilliant colors, Mayuguk stood in his room, staring at his youthful reflection. Yet, within him, an older, wiser soul pondered what Mogi might be doing at that moment. If he could find and eliminate Mogi before he reached his peak power, maybe everything could be resolved easily. The challenge was finding him, as Mogi had appeared in Jaehonu as if he had descended from the heavens after wiping out the Miram Alliance, the Unorthodox Alliance, and the demonic cult. He had vanished without a trace, and announcing his name publicly would only provoke unnecessary risks. Ultimately, Mayuguk's main goal remained the same: to surpass Mogi in strength. A soft voice broke the silence, praising Mayuguk for his impressive performance earlier. Turning around, Mayuguk was surprised to see Leon, his personal bodyguard. His expression darkened again. In the past, he had been unaware that her imposing figure was due to her mastery of a special martial art. She had learned the body petrification technique, which allowed her to harden her body like stone, a secret skill known to only a few. This technique had been taught to her for one purpose: protection. However, the downside was that it made her body grow significantly. She had once saved him, throwing herself in the path of a deadly attack, sacrificing her life so he could live. At that time, he had seen her as just a bodyguard, taking her presence for granted, like one does with air, until it's gone. Stepping closer, he noticed how much larger she seemed compared to his memories, deepening his confusion. People believed that if she had continued to grow naturally, she would have become the most beautiful woman in the world. But her commitment to protecting him had changed everything. One day, her delicate form had transformed, her beauty hidden beneath a body built for battle. Mayuguk realized he had been hiding his true abilities during their fight, but his father had picked up on it anyway. He compared himself to a wild animal that keeps its claws tucked away, not just a simple cat that hisses. His father, however, asked a straightforward question that threw Mayuguk off balance. Why would a beast hide its claws in the first place? This made Mayuguk think, as he had never looked at it that way before. His father's smirk showed he had already figured it out. That was why Mayuguk was still just a cat, not the fierce beast he wanted to be. He had been trained in a powerful sword technique passed down from the heavenly demons, a skill that could rival even the strongest fighters. When asked about his level of mastery, Mayuguk confidently claimed he had it down perfectly. But then, out of nowhere, a fast-moving energy shot came at him. His instincts kicked in just in time and he turned his head, narrowly avoiding the attack. If he had been even a moment slower, he would have been seriously hurt. Frustrated, Mayuguk questioned why his father would attack him if he really believed he had mastered the technique. His father explained that if Mayuguk's claim had been a lie, he would have faced the consequences. But since he dodged the attack, it proved he was telling the truth. Still, Mayuguk argued that a scar on his face wouldn't look good, especially since he looked so much like his dad. His father watched him closely, realizing he might have been too tough on him. Instead of scolding him, he praised Mayuguk for mastering such a difficult skill at a young age. They continued their hunt, moving deeper into the thick forest. Mayuguk thanked his father for the recognition. Soon, they found signs of their target, and his father began to study the tracks. Curious, Mayuguk asked about his father's own hunting lessons. That's when his father dropped a surprising piece of information. Mayuguk had an uncle, but the revelation was short-lived, as his father quickly added that the uncle was no longer alive because he had killed him when he was around Mayuguk's age. Instead of being shocked, Mayuguk surprisingly approved of his father's actions, realizing that if things had gone differently, he might not even be here. He understood that the fight must have weighed heavily on his father's mind. He had seen in his past life that those who seemed the strongest often carried deep scars inside. His father reflected on that time, admitting that he had no other choice but to eliminate his brother to win the succession war. Mayugok, wanting to comfort him, assured his father that he would do whatever was necessary if the situation arose. But his father already knew there was no need to dwell on it. His brother had been cruel, and showing mercy had never been an option. As they climbed the mountain, the path became steeper, and Mayugok, who had never had a family in his past life, wondered what kind of son he had been to his father. When they reached a cliff, his father suddenly stopped, making Mayugok curious about what might be hidden in the forest below. But his father simply said their dinner was waiting and set down his bag. Mayugok got ready to make a move, but his father posed an important question. How could you catch something you couldn't see? Without waiting for an answer, he guided Mayugok to close his eyes and connect with the world around him, teaching him to sense what was out there. Martial masters had a unique way of analyzing his opponents. He didn't just rely on what he could see, he could feel the subtle vibrations in the air around him. This ability allowed him to sense the energy flow of a being in the moment. However, Mayugok, his student, could only pick up on one presence, his father's. Following his father's guidance, Mayugok focused his energy, extending it outward like a thin thread unwinding from a spool. He worked hard to keep that energy flowing without interruption, gradually sharpening his awareness. At first, he could only make out the shape of a tree, but as he concentrated, he began to see the outline of a living creature. It looked like it could be a wild boar or maybe a bear. Chawa, Mayugok's father, was impressed. He recognized his son's talent, especially since he himself had struggled to identify forms so clearly during his own training. Mayugok, however, humbly credited his success to his natural ability to pick up martial arts quickly. As night fell, the smell of roasting meat wafted through the air. Sitting by the fire, Chowa watched his son cook with surprising skill, noting that it was impressive for someone who had never done it before. In reality, Mayugok had hunted many wild boars in his past life, long before he returned to this time. During their conversation, Mayugok skillfully steered the topic to earn his father's approval. He felt a genuine sense of satisfaction knowing that Chawa viewed him positively. Then, he asked if this hunting trip was just a way for Chawa to impress him and secure his position as the successor. Chawa dismissed the idea, stating that Mayugok didn't need his father's influence to become the next leader. Mayugok believed he could achieve that on his own. Chawa, recognizing his son's confidence, asked about the real reason behind the hunt. Mayugok had two answers. The first was straightforward. He wanted to learn everything he could from his father to become stronger. The second reason was more complex. He explained that he wasn't just chasing strength to become the heavenly demon. His father was still alive and strong, and he didn't want to waste his youth obsessing over succession. Instead, he aimed to master the martial arts of the heavenly demons. If becoming the successor was the key to gaining that knowledge, he was willing to pursue it. Above all, he was eager to learn the 9 calamities demonic art, especially since even his father, a master of it, had faced defeat. After listening quietly, Chowa asked about the second reason. A faint smile appeared on Mayugok's face as he admitted he simply wanted to spend time with his father. This was the first time they had done something like this together. Chowa smirked, brushing off the sentiment as a useless emotion that could lead to danger. But Mayugok disagreed. He saw this as a rare chance to bond with the strongest person in the world. In the end, Chowa didn't say more, but his expression hinted at a quiet satisfaction. It was clear he appreciated the moment they shared. Mayugok found it hard to recall memories of his father. There were none to hold on to, just a lingering sense of fear. But fear wasn't a true memory. This time he wanted to change that, not for his father's sake, but for his own. As dawn broke, it was time to head back. Before they left, Chowa declared that since Mayugok had gone hunting with a heavenly demon, they couldn't leave without taking down a tiger. Mayugok was confused but excited as Chowa urged him to stop dawdling and follow. They soon stopped, and Chowa told Mayugok to close his eyes. The target was to the right, exactly 100 yards away. Unlike the previous hunt, this time he needed to feel the wind and channel his energy into it. This idea was new to him. Throughout his martial arts training, no one had ever taught him to approach it this way. Still, he followed his father's instructions, slowly releasing his energy. As he tried to grasp this unfamiliar technique, Chowa warned him not to be overly cautious. Hesitation would only lead to failure. ManhwaCapped needed to ensure his energy reached the target with speed and accuracy. ManhwaCapped was fine-tuning his skills, trying to connect his energy with the wind around him. Once he figured it out, he felt a rush of power that shot through the jungle, searching for something. Suddenly, he sensed a strong presence hiding in the bamboo thicket. It was a tiger. He felt a thrill at the discovery, but his father Chowa watched him with a blank expression. ManhwaCapped noticed and asked if something was bothering him. Chowa warned him not to get too comfortable or overconfident. He reminded ManhwaCapped that the more energy lines he could control at once, the better his chances of survival would be, especially since their hunt was likely to stretch into the night. ManhwaCapped then showed his father a jar filled with his best drink. To his surprise, Chowa seemed to like it and took a swig. ManhwaCapped pretended to be modest, saying it might be too strong for him. Chowa quickly shot that down, saying no tough person would ever complain about strong liquor. With a smirk, ManhwaCapped agreed that worrying about strength was silly. What really mattered was having a fierce spirit. Chowa then asked a serious question, wondering if ManhwaCapped, if he truly had that fierce spirit, could kill his own father without a second thought. ManhwaCapped answered honestly that he couldn't. He couldn't imagine hurting his own parent, but deep down, he knew that if the situation called for it, he might have to do it, even if it was his father. Their conversation felt real and meaningful. Chowa, hearing ManhwaCapped's answer, scolded him again. He said that if there was any hesitation, then ManhwaCapped couldn't claim to have a fierce spirit. He also added that ManhwaCapped needed to learn how to drink properly. So the night went on, with the two of them sitting by the bonfire sharing a moment of genuine connection, two warriors with a bottle of strong liquor between them and an unspoken bond. Days went by, and ManhwaCapped found himself back in his training room. He was pleased with his progress. After focusing hard on his training since he had fallen behind, he had finally mastered the ability to infuse his energy into the wind. Now he could manage 3 to 4 energy lines at the same time. He had exceeded his own expectations. His father had taught him how to release energy to sense his surroundings, a skill that felt like gaining an extra life. It meant he could spot any ambush before it happened. If he kept training and learned to release more than 10 energy lines at once, even the sneakiest enemies wouldn't stand a chance against him. Even with all his father's strength and mastery of the 9 calamities' demonic art, he had still faced defeat. Not in a direct fight, but through a stealthy infiltration. The Heavenly Demon Pavilion, one of the most secure places around, had been breached. It was protected by 3 layers of barriers, 6 different traps, and a top-notch team of warriors. On top of that, there were 8 powerful leaders stationed in all directions, each commanding their own skilled fighters. In the north, the swordsmen of the Northern Heaven were under the command of the One-Sword Supreme. Meanwhile, in the east, the Southern Heaven's Blade, known for their fierce demonic blades, followed the Blood Heaven's Sword Demon. To the east, the Iron Fist faction trained hard under the undefeated Fist Demon, while in the west, the Western Illusion Formation was led by the Soul-Stealing Demon, a master of trickery. In the northeast, a faceless swordsman was on a quest to take on the title of the Evil Smiling Demon. The southeast was home to a drunken swordsman who was always inebriated, and in the southwest, the demonic drunkard led the Poison Fangs and the Poison King, who were obsessed with mastering all kinds of toxins. Finally, in the northwest, the crazy monks embraced madness as a path to enlightenment through their unique interpretation of Buddhist teachings. ManhwaCapped, a key figure in this chaotic world, initially thought that an enemy had invaded from outside. However, he soon realized that the breach had come from within. Someone among the 8 demon leaders had allowed him to enter the Heavenly Demon Pavilion, leading him straight to the Heavenly Demon himself. It became clear that there might have been more than one traitor, as no one had been caught betraying their own. To ManhwaCapped, all 8 demon leaders were now seen as traitors. After his father's death, none of them had sought revenge. Instead, they had chosen to disband the demonic forces entirely. This time, ManhwaCapped was determined to use the situation to his advantage. As he stepped outside, he heard a familiar voice calling out to him mockingly. A bald man stood there, flanked by his goons, clearly annoyed by Mayugako's absence after spending days in the training room. The bald man was impatient and ordered someone named Leon to fetch Mayugako. When Mugoko finally appeared, he immediately noticed Leon and expressed his displeasure at her waiting for him instead of focusing on her own tasks. The bald man wasted no time and started throwing questions at Mugoko. He was a disciple of the Blood Heaven's sword demon, and his arrogance was evident. The shift in power dynamics had changed everything. The heavenly demon had announced that anyone in the cult could become his successor, diminishing the significance of being the heavenly demon's son. This announcement had sparked ambition among many in the cult, pushing them to challenge the current leadership. The bald man had grievances to air, particularly about a disciple named Payan Go, who could no longer practice martial arts, and he blamed Mayugoko for it. He expected an apology, wanting Mayugoko to acknowledge his supposed fault. However, Mayugoko wasn't interested in such discussions. Their relationship wasn't close enough for that. The real reason behind the bald man's visit was clear. After Payan Go's fall from grace, the Blood Heaven sword demon had yet to choose a new successor, leaving his followers desperate to prove themselves and gain favor. Young Passat thought that if he apologized, it might win him some favor with his master and help fix his reputation. Mayugok, however, just smiled calmly, showing no anger but a hint of amusement. He knew that no matter how hard Young tried, his master might not choose him. Yang felt his temper rising. He insisted that he was there only for Payan Go, but Muguk had heard enough. His expression turned serious, and a tense atmosphere surrounded him. He had already put up with too much disrespect. Mayugok's anger flared as he ordered Yang to apologize right away. Yang looked confused, unsure of what he was supposed to apologize for. Mayugok simply stated that Yang had spoken to his subordinate without permission. Leon, who was watching, was taken aback. She had never seen her young master treated this way before. Yang, still not grasping the situation, tried to argue, but it was too late. Mugok stepped forward and made it clear Yang had to kneel and apologize for his rudeness to Leon. Yang flatly refused, pointing at Leon again and using the same insult as before. That was the last straw for Mugok. His fury ignited, and Yang, still unaware of the danger he was in, laughed off the situation, claiming he would rather die than kneel. Mayugok's expression turned wicked, and he drew his sword in a flash, the blade gleaming with his determination. Yang hesitated, shocked by how quickly things had escalated. He was faced with a choice: fight or kneel. Mayugok made it clear that if Yang chose to back down, his master would not be pleased. For the first time, Yang understood the gravity of the situation. Leon was not just a subordinate, she was someone important. Anger coursed through him as he realized he was about to fight over someone he had previously dismissed. But Mayugok remained unfazed. The demand was made, and Yang drew his own weapon. The fight was unavoidable. His henchmen tried to intervene, and Leon reached out, hoping to stop her young master. But the battle had already begun. Yang, filled with arrogance, declared that since he was up against the son of the heavenly demon, he would settle for taking an arm instead of killing him. But in Mayugok's eyes, that choice was never really Yang's to make. Yang positioned himself for an attack, his movements sharp and quick. Mayugok watched him with a calm demeanor as Yang swung his sword, aiming for Mayugok's hand. But Mayugok dodged effortlessly. Before Yang could make another move, Mayugok's blade pierced through Yang's mouth, ending the fight in an instant. The brutal outcome left everyone around, including Leon, in shock. Mayugok looked at the scene with a cold detachment, stating that Yang's own words had led to his demise. He withdrew his sword, allowing Yang's lifeless body to fall to the ground, his expression as emotionless as if he had just crushed a bug. The remaining henchmen rushed forward, panic in their eyes. One of them, trembling, asked if Mugok was ready to face the consequences of his actions. Fear gripped their faces as Mugok pointed out how similar their mouths were to Yang's. Without hesitation, he ordered them to relay his words exactly as he had spoken them. Understanding the threat behind his words, they quickly retreated to their own area. Leon, feeling uneasy, asked why Mugok had taken such drastic action for her. Mayuguk smiled, finding irony in her concern for him. Despite the emotional toll it took on her, he explained that his actions weren't just for her, they were about delivering justice to someone who deserved it. Still, he acknowledged her worry. The Blood Heaven demon wouldn't overlook what had happened. Her fears were valid, as the 8 martial masters of the demonic cult held great power and influence, and even the heavenly demon himself couldn't easily dismiss them. Among them, the Blood Heaven demon was one of the most formidable. Mayuguk had not only crippled one of his disciples, but had also killed another. Yet he maintained a warm smile, assuring Leon that there wouldn't be serious repercussions. At most, the Blood Heaven demon would be scolded for not properly training his followers. Mayuguk stepped closer to Leon, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, urging her not to worry about him. In truth, Yangpoi's death turned out to be a benefit for Mayuguk. Soon after, Leon's face lit up with gratitude as she expressed her thanks to her young master for standing up for her. Mayuguk, with a warm smile, reminded her to always remember this moment and encouraged her to live a life full of joy. Time passed, and Mayuguk found himself lounging in his backyard, lost in thought. Memories of fleeing after the demonic cult fell apart flooded back, each one tinged with a sense of defeat. The weight of despair had been heavy, almost crushing, leaving him without the will to carry on. It was only the pursuit of a single goal that kept him going. Suddenly, he felt the cold edge of a sword pressing against his neck, an unspoken threat that sent a chill down his spine. An old man appeared, radiating a menacing aura. This was the Blood Heaven sword demon, a key figure in the demonic cult, and he had come for swift retribution. Despite the knowledge Mayu had gained from his past life, he found himself vulnerable, without any inner energy to defend himself. There was no escaping this attack, but just as quickly as the threat had emerged, the oppressive atmosphere faded. The old man settled down next to him, a wicked grin on his face, nudging the sword's pommel against Mayuguk. He asked about the recent events, and Mayuguk, suppressing any signs of fear, explained that Yang had been nothing but a fool, provoking a reaction. The old man questioned why he cared about such trivial matters. But without warning, the sword was back at Mayuguk's throat. The old man posed a simple question. Would the heavenly demon care if his son's severed head was delivered to him? Mayuguk considered this, but concluded that the old man would hesitate if he truly feared the heavenly demon's wrath. In response, the old man drew a line in the dirt, illustrating how much the heavenly demon would care about his son compared to the Blood Heaven sword demon. Mayuguk confidently disagreed, asserting that the ratio was more like 7-3 in his favor, as he was the son of the heavenly demon. The old man suggested they could find out for sure by presenting Mayuguk's severed head to the heavenly demon. Mayuguk countered, saying the old man underestimated a father's love. At those words, the old man's oppressive energy returned, and his intent shifted toward action. But before things could escalate, Mayuguk conceded that such drastic measures weren't necessary. After all, the heavenly demon had 2 sons, but only one Blood Heaven sword demon. Understanding dawned on the old man, and a flicker of amusement crossed his face. Mayuguk was no fool, unlike his late disciple. He silently thought that if Yang had possessed even a fraction of his cunning, he might still be alive. With a final remark, the old man expressed that his life had been filled with misfortune and hoped their paths wouldn't cross again. Mayuguk nodded, committing those words to memory, as the old man vanished into the sky with a single leap. Once he was gone, Mayuguk let his guard down, lifting the hem of his nightrobe to inspect the bruises left by the old man's seemingly casual nudge. Despite his unpredictable behavior, the Blood Heaven sword demon never acted without a purpose. Every move was calculated, every word chosen carefully. The repeated mentions of bringing Mayuguk's head to his father were not idle threats. The old man had genuinely considered it. This encounter had been more than just a confrontation. It was a test. The old man's desire to hunt alongside the heavenly demon had sparked his curiosity, leading him to evaluate Mayuguk's worthiness as a successor. Days flew by as Mayuguk threw himself into intense training, honing his control over the energy flowing through him. One day, while training, he noticed movement on the roof of his training hall. Without a second thought, he climbed up, sword in hand, only to freeze in surprise. Standing before him was his father, Chawa, who had come after hearing about Yang Po's death at his son's hands. Mugok stood firm, unwavering in his belief that Yang had met the fate he deserved. Chawa wasn't buying the excuses. Whether Yang Pa deserved it or not didn't matter. The situation was what it was. The Blood Heaven Sword Demon had already made its move, and Chawa had a demand. Mayugok was going to face consequences. Mayugok could sense the hidden motives behind the Blood Heaven's actions. The old man seemed to be testing the bond between father and son, trying to figure out if the cult leader saw Mayugok as a potential successor, even though he claimed there was no good reason to punish his own child. Mayugok realized that the decision had already been made. Chawa remembered a past chat where his son had asked who he trusted most among the Demon Supremes. Back then, he hadn't given an answer, but now it was clear. He trusted no one, not even the Supremes. Chawa then brought up another thing his son had said about the need for order and discipline in the cult. This time he wanted real thoughts, not just empty words about fighting corruption. Mugokak explained that the cult had lost its way. He believed that the true essence of a demon was the conviction that only their cult had the power to defeat absolute evil. Even with the orthodox factions around, the real enemy was the kind of evil so terrible that no human could stand it. Even demons known for their cruelty would turn away in disgust. Mayugok thought the orthodox faction was only good for dealing with lesser evils. He felt they didn't have what it took to face true malevolence. Choa listened quietly as Mugokuk continued, saying that the orthodox faction valued forgiveness, but as long as they held on to that, they'd never be able to confront an enemy that had lost all humanity. The demonic cult, on the other hand, operated outside those moral limits with a strong resolve. Mayugaki insisted that to truly dominate, they needed to be even more wicked than the greatest evils. They could only achieve their goals when the kind of evil that the orthodox faction couldn't defeat bowed down to them. Without this understanding, they wouldn't survive. They had to be ready to punish themselves first. Mayugok realized his father had never thought about things this way before. This wasn't something he learned in the cult, it was a lesson he picked up during his years wandering the Central Plains. After a moment of thought, Choa asked if Mayugok had anything else to say. Mayugok replied that what he had shared was enough. Choa began to see why the Blood Heaven demons wanted punishment. The old man had noticed something in Mayugok and wanted to use the heavenly demon to test it. Mayugok suspected that the cursed elder saw potential in him to either become a successor or to bring disaster to the cult. Either way, the Blood Heaven Sword Demon was sharp. In the end, Choa gave a simple order. Mayugok was to follow. Soon, they reached the entrance to the Minor Heaven Cave. This place was meant for those who could become the Heavenly Demon, whether they were disciples or children of the Heavenly Demon. Getting in was easy, but failing the trials meant being stuck inside forever. Half of those who shared the Heavenly Demon's blood had died in there. Even Mugok's ambitious older brother had never wanted to take it on. But for anyone aiming to be the Heavenly Demon, surviving the cave was a must. Mugok realized he was expected to enter, and he turned to his father, unsure. Choa thought back to his own trial at a similar age. It had taken him 2 months to escape, which was impressive considering he was known as the most talented martial artist among all heavenly demons. No one else had managed to complete it that quickly. The average was 3 years. Mugokuk was shocked. If Choa had taken 2 months, then this challenge was tougher than he thought. But there was no room for debate. He had to go in right away, no time to prepare. It was clear what was expected of him. Choa had made a tough call, sending his son Mayugok into a dangerous place just because the Blood Heaven Sword Demon demanded it. Mayugok studied his father's unreadable face, wondering if this decision came from indifference or a desire for his son to grow stronger and come back smiling. Accepting his fate, Mayugok promised himself he would return sooner than expected. Choa mirrored his son's determination, showing no signs of worry, only excitement to see how Mayugok would handle the challenge. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, Mayugok stepped into the cave. pondering the horrors that had caused so many to fail before him. As he entered the first chamber, he spotted a pedestal with instructions for the first trial. The task seemed straightforward: defeat every opponent without using a sword, aura, or enhanced sword aura. If he failed, he would have to wait 10 days to try again. Thankfully, jars filled with grain balls were scattered around, providing food for those who needed to endure the trial. Without wasting any time, ManhwaCapped stepped into the crimson circle. Suddenly, mannequins began to rise from a hole in the floor. A quick glance told him what he needed to do. Each mannequin had red markings, indicating where he should strike. Without hesitation, ManhwaCapped sprang into action. His movements were smooth and precise, striking each target with deadly accuracy as he flowed from one to the next like a relentless wave. He fought through the endless line of mannequins, but the challenge was tougher than he had anticipated. As time passed, fatigue began to set in, and a few targets still stood. He knew that even one mistake could mean starting over, so he pushed himself harder, taking down another mannequin. Only 4 remained. ManhwaCapped surged forward, his blade flashing as he swiftly dispatched another foe. 3 left. He turned to face the final opponent, its red-marked neck clearly showing where he needed to strike. With determination, he planted his foot and launched himself forward. At the last moment, his sword hit its mark, and the final mannequin fell. Breathing heavily, he steadied himself, realizing how close he had come to being stuck in the trial for another 10 days. He acknowledged that passing this test would have been impossible for him before his recent growth. With the first trial behind him, the path to the second trial opened up. He moved forward and found a stone slab covered in inscriptions from previous challengers. Some had noted how many attempts it took them to succeed, while others bragged about their skills. A few admitted defeat, lamenting their inability to escape once they entered. As he leaned in to read the markings, a smirk appeared on his face when he spotted a familiar inscription. Chawa had left a blunt comment, mocking those who had failed even once. While his father had a point, ManhwaCapped found it amusing that he took the time to criticize others. Continuing down the hall, he entered a new chamber filled with an array of weapons neatly arranged. The variety suggested that the next trial would require their use. Approaching the instruction pedestal, he read about the next challenge. He had to use a sword mounted on the wall to split a stone in half within 2 hours. Unlike the first trial, this one allowed the use of both regular and enhanced sword aura. If he failed to complete the task in time, he would have to wait 20 days before trying again. Stepping onto the red circle, another pedestal appeared, presenting a single polished stone ball. The task seemed simple at first. Cut the ball in half within 2 hours. With sword aura, this should have been a breeze, and hundreds could be cut in that time. But something felt off about the instructions. ManhwaCapped hesitated, wondering if there was more to the task than met the eye. To test his theory, he swung the sword at the ball, but as soon as the blade hit, it snapped in 2. Realizing that a regular strike wouldn't work, he understood that sword aura was necessary. His first instinct was to channel enhanced sword aura to finish the trial quickly, but a nagging doubt held him back. If the solution was so easy, why was this trial even created? Looking at the inscriptions left by those who had faced this challenge before, he found one record claiming the task had been completed in a single attempt using enhanced sword aura. Another detailed a staggering 89 failed attempts without aura before finally succeeding. What caught his attention most was his father's inscription. Unlike the previous trial, where Choa had mocked others, this time his words were different.